Hello everybody, Tom here, and today I'm going to talk you through some of the changes that have happened to Drukhari as a result of the new balance data slate. If this seems a little bit on the wing, it's because it is. The points and stuff only changed yesterday. I've had a few hours last night and this morning to think about it, and I think it's going to be good to just talk through some of the key changes and get a sense of where we think Drukhari might be at now going forwards. Before we get into it, I think it's important to say that this sets an amazing precedent. I think the idea of changing things quarterly, applying new updates to factions every few months, and addressing, as we've seen in this particular one, some of the key problems that struggling factions have, as well as taking on some of the overpowered armies, is really, really good. So you won't catch any salt in this piece at all. I've been of the mind that a lot of the changes that we see here are very necessary for Drukhari, and it's about building a better, more competitive and interesting game. So very much pro the changes, but I'm also quite optimistic because, to be honest, guys, this was a light touch for Drukhari. This is the second set of nerfs that Drukhari have had, and once again, we've come out looking pretty good all told, and that's because they've given with one hand and taken away with another, but we'll get into that in more detail. I'm going to talk you through some of the casualties, as it were, talk you through some of the new opportunities, and then I think very, very briefly about Drukhari going forwards as well. So let's get into it. So, casualties. There were some casualties. The build that Goonhammer refers to as Drukhari good stuff, with lots of raiders with infantry in, that's been doing the rounds for a long time now on the competitive scene, has taken a lot of points rises. So let's not sugar it. Witches have gone up 2 points base and 1 point extra in addition for Blood Brides. So if you're a Blood Brides user, they are now 150 points for 10, which is quite steep. Succubi have both gone up. I say both because everybody runs two. Both the Succubi you're likely to run have gone up 20 points each. So they're 80 base, 95 if you want to run the upgraded one. So again, getting towards a fairer price for them. Anyone that's played against Succubi knows the damage that they do is huge. So 80 points, given how fragile they are, definitely feels like a fairer footing. Incubi have gone up 2 each. It's now 90 for a squad of 5 rather than 80. Kronos have gone up 5 each. Kronos shooting's obviously been a big mainstay of Drukhari lists in recent times as well. And the Raider, by virtue of taking up the points on the Dark Lance by 10, Raiders now cost you 105 if you want to run the Dark Lance variant. So across a lot of Drukhari lists, including many that I have run, you're looking at 100 plus additional points on top if you want to run all of these things that you were running before. So there are casualties. Witches, I think maybe might have been hit too hard here. That's the only one where I'm a little bit wary. I feel everything else is completely fair, but given how easily witches cave in and die, and how many things out there can just kill witches without even, breaking a sweat, we may see less of those. But I don't know. Interesting one to watch. We'll see. There are much better Raider Rush players out there than me, and we'll soon see whether they think it's still worthwhile. So a lot of hits to the traditional sort of Raider Rush type list. But all, as you can see, quite small, reasonable points adjustments. There isn't anything there that feels fatal. I said Blood Brides for 150 for 10 might be hard to justify for some players, but we will see. And so this, in and of itself, would represent quite a significant hit. But as we'll see in the next section, at the same time as adding points to this, GW have also taken a load of points off some other stuff. So let's think about that. Opportunities. There are opportunities here, guys. There have been some substantial points drops, which actually help to kind of counterbalance some of the rises that have also happened. So my favourite one, and this was the only points drop that I thought needed to happen before this balance update, and that was Talos. Talos were a mainstay of Drukhari in 8th. They're probably my favourite unit in the Drukhari army, and they've gone down 10 each, which I think helps them a lot. Talos were already starting to make an appearance, and actually one of the things when we talk about Drukhari going forwards is that a lot of what's been hit was already going out of style a little bit, and a lot of what's been buffed was already just starting to appear in the competitive scene. So it's quite interesting. Whether that's players anticipating the changes or not, I don't know. But Talos are definitely an example. So things like Artists of Flesh Talos with -1 damage were already out there doing the rounds and doing quite well. And that's definitely the case now because they've got cheaper. 30 points off a squad of 3 is pretty nice. But the other surprise winner here, and it's Coven again, is Grotesques. And Grotesques have gone down 5 each, 35 now for a Grotesque. Grotesques are really good. I got absolutely schooled by a player running about 15 of them at the Goonhammer Open quite recently, and I saw firsthand how powerful they can be, again, especially with that -1 Artist of Flesh, -1 damage trait on them. They can be really, really sticky and really nasty, and they're good all-rounders for playing the mission as well. So cheaper packs of Grotesques is an interesting one, and that and Talos is quite exciting. And not if you run a lot of Grotesque and Talos, you're going to end up a lot of points down here, which might then enable you to, pay for the other stuff that's gone up. The Homunculus dropped down 10. I think that's another one where, you can argue it needed to happen because he was always bizarrely expensive compared to the other characters who were much more popular in lists than he was. At the moment, it looks like there's drops to the Ravager and to the Planes. I'm a little dubious here, just wondering whether the change to the Dark Lance that we saw on the Raider, whether that might be retrospectively applied here and actually Ravagers will go up a tiny bit and Planes will go up a tiny bit, but I don't know. We'll have to see. Neither of them were sort of the linchpin of lists in recent times. As it stands, 130-point Ravager with 3 Dark Lances, that's not bad. That's quite nice, and that again makes a bit of room for things that have gone up elsewhere. Other opportunities are that some of our other offenders are simply the same. Hellions didn't get hit at all. They're not good in all matchups, but they can be amazing, and staying at the same price point I think is brilliant. Drazar didn't go up. There were rumours about Drazar going to 180 points a couple of days before this drop, which would have been, I think, probably fatal for him, but actually he already got his points rise in the last FAQ for Drukhari, so I think he's probably okay where he is. So some of those big hitters stay the same. Kronos can still overcharge their guns via Dark Technomancer, so that didn't get fixed. So that's staying very much the same. So that's where some of the opportunities arise from in terms of the army itself, and you can see it's largely concentrated in Coven, but also in fire support a little bit, which is all the stuff that was getting neglected when it was just about running forward with a ton of OBSEC and infantry and just stifling the enemy that way. So we'll see how that affects things. The other opportunity here is obviously that Drukhari, to be honest, were one of 3 factions getting nerfed, and I think you can definitely argue that we got nerfed the least. The changes to Orcs and to Admech, particularly to the top competitive builds that we've seen of those in the last few months, they don't exist now. They can't exist now in the same way. Between points rises for Admech and changes to buggies and Planes for Orcs and Planes for Admech as well, the lists that were most dominant literally do not exist anymore, which simply isn't true of Drukhari. Drukhari need to shed a couple of units, but that they can still play in essentially the same way. Whereas I think Admech and Orcs, these big sort of mobile Alpha Strike type builds, which really do kill Drukhari very nicely if they just come forward and blow up all your transports and kill all your stuff turn 1. Those builds are going to have to completely rethink. So actually, whilst Drukhari probably just need to nudge the direction of travel a little bit, 2 of our biggest competitors are now going to have to completely rethink, which I think is really interesting. And I think both books, particularly Orcs, have lots more interesting stuff going on in there, and they'll come back with a whole load of new challenges. But there's opportunity here in that as well, if you're a competitive Drukhari player, because I don't think it's going to take Drukhari players particularly long to adapt to these changes. And I don't know that the same is true of Admech and Orcs. And we saw with Admech before, the last time they got nerfed, it took a couple of months actually before Admech players really came back from it. So we will see. I definitely smell opportunity here, and I definitely smell a more interesting competitive scene and more interesting top table games going forwards for those that get there. I won't be there, but have fun up there, guys. All right, we'll take a moment, and then we'll think about what Drukhari might be doing going forwards. So where does this leave the faction? Well, it's not bad news at all. I have to say, I think Drukhari needed some of those changes. Some of the overpowered trading pieces needed to be brought closer towards a fair points cost, and I think they have been. So that's good for Drukhari players all around the world, really, because you want fairer games, you want less feel bads in your games, you want to be able to use the toys you want to use without feeling like you're sort of doing someone dirty, and so that's good news, full stop. In terms of conceptually where Drukhari might go, I think, as I say, what was interesting was that Drukhari were already evolving in the last couple of months towards tougher, more resilient, more Coven-centered builds, and these points changes pretty much say, yeah, go and do that and have loads of points off. So Grotesques, Talos, Artists of Flesh especially, that -1 damage, but a bit of Dark Technomancer support on the Kronos, which can still do that, perhaps. That's certainly what I'm thinking, and I'm seeing a lot of potential there. The popular Raider and Infantry builds might have to rein it in a bit. Less vehicles, less units, still loads of bite. And you can probably still play a sort of elite character, go and murder the enemy type game. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. I think it rewards mixed builds. It will reward real space raids as well, because the homunculus is cheaper. So all those Covenant units being cheaper means that if you take a combined force with the real space raid, which again was becoming more popular, then I think that these changes have really provided for that. So it's going to be a really interesting time. I always see Drukhari as a melee army first and foremost, and a shooting army second. And again, I think these changes probably reward that, because a few of our classic melee units are now looking a lot more attractive, a lot more viable, and just spamming a load of raiders and shooting someone to death is going to cost you more points. So that's good. So it's going to be really interesting to see. I've got a couple of events coming up before Christmas time. And to be honest, I was very much in a place of feeling like I didn't want to run Drukhari at the moment, and that stemmed in large part from an awareness that they needed changes. They needed a nerf on some of these key units, and other things in the game needed to change for them to be much fun. It felt like they were bullying weaker books and then getting massacred by gun lines at the top anyway. I think this, for me, is quite reinvigorating, as I expect this data slate balance is for lots of players. It's certainly nice seeing like Necron players and other players really excited about these changes. So I think a couple of events to test some things out is what is called for. So starting with Priority Target on the 27th, I think it will be time to get my Coven hat back on and start seeing what they're capable of. So we'll report back on that as it develops. But yeah, I think loads to be excited about here, guys, and nothing to be cross about. Good changes, targeted changes, subtle changes, and the promise of doing it every quarter means that anything ludicrous that gets missed can get adjusted now, and that goes for our enemies as well as ourselves, which is great news. So yeah, happy hunting, and have fun reconfiguring and recreating some sort of new monster to take onto the tabletop scene. See you later.